Martin Scorsese is one of the greatest directors of all time. Far and away, a guy that when he releases a movie, we're going to watch it. And he released in October of 2023 Killers of the Flower Moon, adapted from a book about the true horrors that a Native American tribe experienced in the early 1900s. And we are going to talk about this movie because is it as great as some of Martin Scorsese's other movies, or is it a 3.5 hour dirge that is more depressing than it is exciting? This is Last Page. Bo Jackson number 34 is the issue of Last Page that we are experiencing right now. I am Maverick King, happy to be joining you today, along with Rembo and Jason Cedars across the oceans of the internet. A wonderful time to be had by all. Sometimes you watch a movie and you feel like you have aged with the movie. That once you watched the movie, you were a young person, and then when you finished watching the movie, it was like Titanic, and you were like, I am 137 years old. And this is kind of like that movie, because this movie was 3.5 hours long. Was it the greatest time spent of 3.5 hours? Perhaps, perhaps not. Let us talk about it. As a huge fan of Martin Scorsese and movies like Casino and Goodfellas and The Irishman, which I am a huge stan of that movie, which does not get the respect it should get, this movie did disappoint me in a lot of aspects. But I want to hear from the panel first, especially because I have no idea what he thought of the movie, because he is our joyous center of the universe that beams light and beams energy and loves everything. Jason Cedars, did you enjoy this movie, which, let me just say the plot line from IMDb.
Please do.
Starring the one and only Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, when oil is discovered in the 1920s. When oil is discovered in 1920s Oklahoma under Osage Nation land, the Osage people are murdered one by one until the FBI steps in to unravel the mystery. Jason Cedars, what was your takeaway from Killers of the Flower Moon?
I went into this movie knowing nothing about what this movie was. I knew somewhat of the time period, somewhat of what was going to be happening. So I really enjoyed it as far as like a documentary of telling me of a time period that I'm not so aware of. From that aspect, great. You know, as far as a movie, I mean, the long runtime is justified in the fact that it's saying a lot of information. I don't feel like there's too many like down times as far as it's just a lot of information in a very large story. So I definitely think the runtime is justified. It needed to be that long. But as a movie enjoyer, movie goer, if I sat in the theaters and had to do this, it would be very hard, you know. And me sitting at home watching this, it was a 2-day adventure. You know, it was okay, let's get the first hour and a half. And actually I found like a perfect stopping point, which I didn't realize it when in the middle of the movie, pretty much like halfway through. Like this is one they could have done an intermission. You know, this needed to almost have that sort of feel to it. So I enjoyed it. I mean, just a little long and short, it was hard to see a lot of that stuff, and I think that's what we need to start doing as far as American culture and myself. I need to be watching some of these hard things that this country was built on, and I think we need to start forcing some of this stuff down our throats too. So I love the direction that I feel like even filmmaking is going these past couple years with Reservoir Dogs. I'm watching Echo at this point, and now this one where we're getting a lot of these Native American stories and a lot of actors and actresses that are solid. So as if this was a documentary, like one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, with all these great actors portraying all these roles and things like that. And there's a lot of good points and a lot of good actual acting, but it was a long one. It was a hard one, but at the end of the day, I will give it my seal of approval. If that means
the illustrious.
Yeah, I don't know what that seal of approval really stands for with my tenure on the show of like I seal approval Super Mario Brothers, so it's right up there with that, you know. But no.
I mean, so should we get CC seal of approval at this point?
To your guys, her opinion weighs just as much as mine, so yeah. So yes,
Oh,
I'm
man.
interested to see what your guys' opinion is too, because yeah, we actually didn't talk too much about this amongst ourselves.
Yeah. I thought when I finished watching the movie, I watched it all the way through. I thought I was going to take a break, and I didn't. I watched it all the way through. And I got to the end of it, and I was like, I don't know how I feel right now. I was kind of just confused as to how I felt. I wasn't bored, like out of my mind when I watched the movie, but when I got to the end of it, I think I was confused because I didn't really feel anything. I didn't get nothing of the movie didn't really evoke anything out of me. Yes, a bunch of horrible things happen, and it's like I knew that going in. I was like, okay, a bunch of Native Americans are going to get murdered for money purposes, essentially. But by the time I got to the end of it, I thought it was anticlimactic. That was kind of the biggest feeling I had. Is I just got to the end and I thought like there was no real highs of the movie or no real lows. It's just kind of this thing happens and then this thing happens and then this thing happens in a very documentary style format, which the book is a documentary of what happened, right? A documentation of what happened. And so the movie is reflective of that. But I think this movie would be better served as a actual documentary because it's very dry. Like just the format of just like, hey, this one thing happens and then this and this. There's no like big mystery. So you're not trying, as an audience member, you're not trying to figure out what's happening. And then as an audience member, I don't know who you're really supposed to be like connecting with, because Robert De Niro is the old, greedy, grimy, big bad guy, but he's just kind of like old man Robert De Niro. Leo is a bumbling idiot who is very easily manipulated. And then his wife is a very uninspiring, boring centerpiece. Between the three of them, I was just like, I don't care about any of these characters personally. Like, I care that that these horrible things are happening, but like on a personal level, none of those three really, they didn't grab me, you know? So I don't know. It's just a weird movie. It's a weird movie. I kind of gave me mixed feelings, but not in a good way.
So did I miss something? Because I was like shocked by the plot twist in the middle. Like I didn't expect that. Like, were there leading breadcrumbs that these two were going to do this plot twist in the middle? Trying to lead, like, is not spoiler heavy, but because it's like after the hour and a half is when you start to figure out that, you know.
We'll get into more spoilers in a little bit. So, you know, right now we won't go too spoiler heavy. We'll go into spoilers a little bit, but
it's interesting you said that, Remy, because I was like thrown off. Like the middle of the movie is when I started to get more intrigued by it because it was such a like a twist thing. So I didn't see that coming. So maybe that's what made it a little bit.
I think the difference, the problem with the twist is that the character of Leonardo DiCaprio doesn't come off at any point as a good person. He is simply a simpleton.
Yeah.
And he's being manipulated. And so him and his twist of character isn't all of that jarring where it's like, oh, but you're supposed to be the good guy. He's along for this ride. And so we'll talk about that in a second. The problem with that I have, like, this is if I open up to a broader question of movies, it is, how closely do you make your movie realistic? And I think this is the problem when people talk about, oh, that movie, you know, they took such liberties with the movie. They took such, you know, this movie, these things didn't happen the way they happened in the movie. The movie's unrealistic. Well, maybe there's a good reason for that, because to me, if you look at this movie, I don't know the ins and outs of the actual story, but this movie felt like it felt like a real telling of what happened. That these Native Americans were slaughtered in this horrible murder plot by these horrible people, and the movie kind of just plays out very straightforward, very streamlined, and it's so different because there's a lot of there are similarities, especially in the third act, to Goodfellas. And Goodfellas has all of these crazy characters. You have Joe Pesci is playing this insane psycho murderer, and you cannot take your eyes off Joe Pesci. You're like, oh my God, what is this guy gonna do? Like, this guy's crazy. He's shooting people in the feet. He's shooting people like when he shouldn't be. Like, you don't know what's gonna happen. Like, it's so riveting because you it's so unpredictable what's gonna happen, even though it's based on a true story. So I don't know how realistic that portrayal is. However, this story, it plays out pretty much how you think it's going to play out from the get-go, and there's no character in this movie that really inspires you to keep watching. And that might be an attribute to keeping it a realistic portrayal of what happened. So this is a conundrum of, do you exaggerate or do you create chaos or characters where none exists to make your movie more interesting, or do you play it as straightforward and as realistic as possible? Because I feel like this movie probably was played realistic and straightforward. However, it did not make it nearly as interesting as a handful of other Martin Scorsese movies.
But see, you got to be careful with that. You start like romanticizing or making these horrible white men intriguing. That means you're focusing more on them, and not making the Native Americans, which Lily Gladstone, Molly, I thought was intriguing. Like, I enjoyed her even because of how placid she was, and when she did show emotion, I was almost like searching for those scenes, when her and Leo first start to meet, and she is just stone faced, but then he's able to make her smile and come out of her shell a little bit. I like to see that, and then how their relationship blossomed, and then of course, didn't blossom, withered, I guess, the opposites. But she was actually one of the more driving factors of the movie for me. Like, because Leo and De Niro, I'm glad they didn't make them such likable, people that you wanted to, see or survive to the end, or, have a good ending. Like, I kept like seeing them get stepped on, get lower, get treated worse, as the movie progressed, so I was like, okay, though, I like this side going down, this side going up. So, but it's that whole documentary kind of feel of it, where it's like, this is the information, these people, not these characters that you want to see triumph or kind of get to the end. It's a different movie than what we've watched and reviewed.
It's I do see what you're saying, Jason, as far as like, you don't want to just have Leo be I understand why you wouldn't want to have Leo or Robert De Niro as some super charismatic villains, where it's like, you kind of like like where it dampens how horrible or how awful they were. But I don't like Daniel Day-Lewis, and I'm not saying this is how they had to be, but Daniel Day-Lewis in Gangs of New York as the Butcher. Mm-hmm. No, I don't. He has quite a personality, but no ounce of anybody is going to be like feeling bad about what happens to this man.
Yeah, good point.
So there is a way to be a villain and be interesting and have a level of charisma without being a sympathetic character.
Yeah, good point.
And I feel like Robert, dude, it's an old man directing another fucking old man. Mm-hmm. Like, Martin Scorsese is 100 years old. Robert De Niro is at least twice as old as that. And it's just, why the fuck are they still casting this dude as like, it's not that he's awful, but it's just, he just can talk in this kind of similar way.
Oh yeah, he was so De Niro, just his face, like, and everything. Yeah,
dude, he's a character actor of himself at this point, and he has just like, the range just isn't there. So it's like, when I'm watching Robert De Niro in this, I'm just like, you're the same dude that just came out of The Irishman. It's like, except it's
he's even doing the De Niro face.
that was an accident. I was literally just agreeing in my brain with what Remy was saying, and I just happened to make that face, but it wasn't. I didn't try to make that face.
It was so De Niro. See, you can't even stop it.
Oh, I'm not saying he's exactly the same, but it just feels like the Robert De Niro that has been so great over so many different movies has just shrunken into a very short space of what he is able to do now.
I mean, Brendan Fraser, I barely recognized him. I know he's coming off The Whale or whatever, but it's like
He is the whale.
yeah. I mean, that was so cool to see him as something so different. So, I mean, yeah, certain actors, they can be a variety of themselves, or some are just that actor, that character.
See, with The Irishman, like Robert De Niro is a stuttering kind of like a muscle. He's a muscle character that does the dirty work for mobsters basically throughout this movie, and he's kind of not really sure of himself, but he goes throughout the movie. I do feel like Robert De Niro, compared to other movies of the last 10 years where Robert De Niro phones it in and doesn't give a fuck, this movie he really does bring it, and he does try his best to be this menacing patriarchal figure, and I feel like he really does accomplish that. But it is difficult to separate, this Robert De Niro from
Meet the Fockers. I mean, he was the same day.
We've seen this guy in movies going back 50 years, so it's hard to watch him. And I do feel like he did a great job in this movie for what his character was asked, but at the same time, this movie's plot line is set up where these Native Americans are getting murdered one after another, and you're basically just watching this massacre over and over again of people are killing these Native American women, and the dudes that marry them, then these white dudes that marry them, then inherit everything that they earned because the Osages had rights to all this oil that was on their land. White dude marries them, they get killed, they inherit the money. It is like this, you just feel sick watching it, just being like, I cannot believe this is a real story, just because of how terrible it plays out. But it's just, as a movie, that's the thing. As a documentary, it's a fascinating story. But as a movie, for 3.5 hours, I was just like, man, I'd so rather be watching Goodfellas right now.
I'd rather watch
the final act.
I would have rather watched the radio show version of that. Like at the very end, I was so intrigued by that radio show. I was like,
that was cool.
Yeah, can we just see the radio show version of this whole movie? Because that's essentially what we were watching or listening to, I guess, is what you figure out, that this was all a radio show or whatnot. That this is, that's what I got out of it, is like we were along the ride as a listener on this radio show. Did you guys get that?
I guess I didn't really think of it like that. I thought of it more of just like Martin Scorsese being super old and paying homage to something that he grew up with, because that's how fucking old he is.
And then inserting himself into his own movie
inserting himself, which, I mean, you're fine. It's fine, Martin. You've earned the right. Go ahead. Like, has he ever been in any of his other movies?
I don't know. Yeah, I should have done that.
Nothing this in like that much. He's been brief cameos here and there, but nothing that had speaking lines that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought it was kind of a fun little thing, but that whole like representation, and there's like some old video clips you can go back and see how old radio shows used to do.
Oh yeah.
Performances like that, and it is fascinating. It's a whole, just like the movie portrays. It's a fascinating way and very interesting and entertaining of how they used to do radio shows.
One of the guys in the band is Jack White from White Stripes.
Oh, that's cool.
And on the raised stage,
cool.
I was looking through the cast, and he came up, and they're like, player on the stage play at the very end. I'm like, oh,
funny.
Shit.
That's funny.
When I was a kid, I grew up driving along with my dad in his 93 Toyota pickup in a cassette player, and he would play Sherlock Holmes, Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce, radio Theater of the Mind radio plays from the 1940s.
Theater of the Mind. Wow.
Yeah, that's cool.
I really love that art form. I do really appreciate, and we're kind of bouncing around, but who cares? We're the end of the movie. They're recalling the whole movie in a radio format that permeated the 1940s and 50s, where people would do these theatrical interpretations of real stories, of detective stories, and a lot of it was sponsored by some brand from back in the day. And they do that in the end of this movie, and it's really, that is the part of the movie I like the most, because it is a very unique retelling of this bygone art form that when I was a kid and I heard Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce being Sherlock Holmes, and Dr. Watson on the radio, you do create this mind or your idea of what a story was, and that is how this story is retold at the end of the movie, which I did appreciate, and I did like. That was the part of the movie I liked the most. Other than that part, everything else was pretty straightforward. And
the reason that there's no real I didn't feel like there was a plot twist in this movie is because it's set up at the very beginning when Robert De Niro, King, what is his character's name? King
William Hale. William King Hale.
Mm-hmm. when he sits Leo Ernest down and gives him the spiel about you gotta marry one of these folks, and so you can get rights to the land. It was I felt like the whole movie was laid out right there. It was just oh, this is the bad guy that's conniving his way to try to touch and try to get his hands into all of this wealth in this area, and Leo's the dumb idiot who is just gonna go along because he's just okay, uncle, that sounds like a good idea.
See, I had the exact opposite. I thought they were setting themselves up to be the good guys, and someone else was going to be coming in. This was De Niro, and because De Niro at that point has played himself as almost a member of the Osage, how much he was gifting and he spoke the language and all this sort of stuff, and he's wanting to bring this his cousin is his nephew into this fold of this is a great Indian family that we're all going to be part of, and moving forward together. Because I knew something bad was going to happen, but I thought something bad was going to happen to them also. I did not think that they were the ones doing it. And then it's I'm trying to remember when you start to figure out that he is the murderer, or De Niro is behind it all. It's because it's an hour and a half into it when they finally just come out and say it, because everything is so back of the hand, kind of not seeing all the information. Because I was literally all of a sudden I moved to the edge of my couch. I was these two are the ones that are behind it, and then he's I was really like that, and I was that's why I started this, was saying, did I miss something in the beginning? So maybe you're just more astute than I was. Or
I mean, I just knew that I knew that it was nefarious, a nefarious plot from the beginning, and so when they laid it out like that, I was oh, those are the two guys. These are the bad guys. Because I think if I'm not mistaken, the turning point that you're referring to is when you see Leo as the guy that beats the PI over the head. Initially they show the PI get messed up, but they don't show who does it.
It's before
and then,
that.
A little bit later, you see it's Leo.
No, because the PI gets called because one of the sisters or both of the sisters have been murdered at that point. So it's when one of the sisters, because the first sister, the young drunk one, she gets shot off the cliff, and then the second one's blown up. And I think it's when. Because I think it's when the house blows up, or he's having to get someone to go to the house. I think that's when you start to figure out, because they're already starting to talk to the hitmen that are the prohibition, are in the woods, making the liquor and things like that. When they start to talk to them, which that was some of my favorite part, is the whole prohibition side of this, seeing how they were all drinking all the time, but it's you better not do that in public, or you're hiding it and things like that. Because that was what some of the best of this movie was, is that kind of little insight into the Roaring 20s, kind of that this is 1921, so this was that time frame where what's the other Leo movie where he's in the Roaring 20s and with the cars?
Great Gatsby.
Yeah. It almost had that sort of feel, which even impressed me more about Leo, because Leo is so that Great Gatsby sort of actor, character, things like that. For him to play this dumb, very non-inspiring character, I was good for you, not always, taking those roles, and then also being able to do it. Look like an idiot, and the teeth thing.
Yeah, you did a good job of not going full something or other that I can't think of.
Yeah. But no, I guess I was full something or other that I can't, because I could not catch all the stuff in the beginning, But no, that was like my favorite is the actual history of this. So when I was doing research on this, I went way too far into the Tulsa massacre, Tulsa race
Yeah.
war, or
Oof.
Tulsa or whatever, because that happened.
That's a rough one.
So that happened during this movie. So they're like
Yeah.
going through the movie and they're like, hey, what just happened in Tulsa, which is also in Oklahoma, which is
Yeah.
probably not too far away from what they were doing. And so much research on that shit, which I realized Watchmen, the show.
Yeah.
That's where we got a little bit of the Tulsa massacre. Like, I think that like the show, part of that was based around that. And I cannot believe that point in history. I mean, that's so fucked up. And this is just as fucked up as that. And so it was like these two major points in white America where what we did to, in indigenous and then minorities and stuff. It's like, yeah, it's a hard pill to swallow, this movie. And I walked away with those two things. I'm like, oh my God, man, I need to like do something.
Yep, this is the state of the world 100 years ago, dude.
Yeah, man, and not 100. 100. That's even fucking scarier. 100 years ago. Like this.
100 years ago.
There's people still alive from that time.
Yeah, it's that and circling back to my original point is that it is tough because the subject matter is super intense and super riveting and fascinating, of just how badly this tribe got fucked over. And in this movie, they're pretty much just regular people trying to live their lives. They happened into this oil find and they became rich overnight. And then people, bad actors, took advantage of them and just one by one slaughtered a lot of them. And it's such a horrific story. But as a movie, was it the most riveting 3.5 hours of time I could spend elsewhere? And no, it was not. And it's like, it's one of those, it's a well-made movie. Would I recommend this movie? If you want to just watch a shitty thing for 3.5 hours, sure. But there's other movies, especially movies that handle like even movies like God damn it, what's the fucking Spielberg movie?
Avatar?
No.
You're talking about The Color Purple?
No.
I'm trying to think of
Spielberg.
Schindler's List. Like Schindler's List is a horrifically depressing movie, but as a movie, there's a progression to the story at which it gives you levity and gives you like hope. And it gives you the kind of an end game to the story. There is no end game to the story other than it's just depressing. And that's fine if you're just trying to learn a story, but at the same time, 3.5 hours is a lot to ask of someone to watch something that doesn't really have a resolution.
And I think you need some of that information going in, being like, hey, this is going to be information dump. This is going to be documentary, but you're looking for this exciting conclusion and these characters and stuff. Yeah, it would be hard. But yeah, I'd recommend this to someone, but I'd do it with that premise. I mean, like, hey, this is going to be hard. A lot of knowledge is going to be dumped on you, but you're going to come out of this a better person and more knowledgeable. I mean, like how much the culture of the Osage, and how much rituals we got to see and how much of their garb, like what they were wearing and all this sort of stuff, in which doing some research, like they used actual Osage. They're in the Osage
I believe it's
country. Osage. I'm sorry. I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. But like how much like accuracy there was behind this, and how much we're getting to see Indian culture and things like that. Cause that's so just not portrayed in mainstream television right now. So it's like when you're going into it and coming out of it, it was like, this is going to be information. This is going to be something like me watching Band of Brothers or the Pacific one or something, but no, that has a little more cinematography in it. But you're going into it being like, this is essentially a documentary with actors, sort of stuff. But yeah, I learned so much, and I'm so happy, how much like accurate Indian portrayal was in this, and a couple of those Indian actors were awesome. They were Native American or American Indian. I don't know what I'm supposed to say anymore, actually.
First Nation.
First Nation.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. But
here before us, people.
And like I was saying, I'm watching Echo right now, which is very, Native American.
Oh yeah, Jason, how dare you throw Echo into this fucking? That's a blight on anybody who was a part of that, Native American or not. That has nothing to do with.
I was fine dining the other day, and then I went into McDonald's, and it was very similar.
Well, if the
same people, I thought I'd top it off with some Taco Bell.
If the same people were working at the nice restaurant that we're working at, Taco Bell. That's all my reference was. I'm seeing the same actors in Echo as I'm seeing in that. I'm not comparing anything else but the actors. Yeah, because old grandma is grandma in Echo, and it's just interesting to see the same actress, play a very different role and stuff. But hey, that's just Native American representation is all I'm trying to say here, which you guys should be more about.
If you want, and if again going back to the Native American, I can't speak for Native Americans. However, I would say more, and it's a fictional tale, but a more effective representation of their blight, and in a much more effective movie, I would say would be Wind River. Taylor Sheridan movie. That movie is extremely powerful and portrays, how difficult their modern day life is. And I feel like it does a much better job of conveying empathy. In this movie, obviously does just because of how terrible it is. But again, 3.5 hours is a lot of movie to just tell a tale that doesn't really have a cinematic, doesn't have much cinematic diversity to it.
Of course, Wind River has John Bernthal in it. That's why you're all about it.
Okay. He's actually a very small part of the movie. He's a very small
Order.
Jeremy and Elizabeth. Yeah, I do remember that one with
it's a damn good movie, dude.
It is good.
That movie brought me to fucking tears. Yeah. Movie is
it has a hard ending. It's all in the snow the whole time. I remember that, just being cold watching that movie. But no, it's a different feel than other movies and a different feel than other Scorsese stuff. So I think it's all about perception. It's all about what you're thinking that you're going to get going into it and getting something different.
I think.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Okay.
Thanks.
What I think this movie really missed out on, which if they're going for informational, what could have been really interesting was having more of an in-depth look into one or the other of the formation of the FBI, actually seeing the process of how that came about, and then how that directly correlated to this story. That or the actual judicial process. But the judicial process was so brief. It felt so brief and just assumptive of just like, oh yeah, everybody knows that they're guilty and we're just going to quickly figure it out. And it didn't seem like they had to dig all that hard. It's just like these little dominoes that just kind of fall in a predictable sort of manner. At least that's how I felt.
No. So you're 100% right, Remy. And that's what the book is. The book is from J. Edgar Hoover and Coolidge and the OBI. Because it's OBI at that point. It's not even FBI, I think.
I think it's just BI.
Or it's BI, BOI.
In the movie, they keep saying like, "Oh, we're from the BI."
BI, that's right. Yeah, and
Bureau
so
of Investigation.
Bureau of Investigation.
So that was what the book was. It's all about
Bureau of Investigation.
The bureau being started almost because of this. Like it might have been one of their first cases or something like that. Wait, what did I miss?
Sorry, Remy brought up the guy that I hate in Hollywood. Okay, so I don't hate him. I don't hate Jesse Plemons, but Jesse Plemons is a tumor in cinema because this guy cannot be anything other than just a blank
dude. I love that actor, dude. I love that guy.
Listen,
I'm from the Bureau
this guy.
Yes,
in this movie, you cannot get a reading on whether or not he's supposed to be like a well-intentioned person, whether or not he's just there to close a case. And that's every movie he's in because he's just got beady ass eyes, and he's just like, "Well, I see that you need something done," and it's just like, "What? I don't know what to make of you. You're like the ditto of Pokemon of actors," and I'm just like, "I don't know what you are, Jesse Plemons. Please be a good guy or bad guy, but you're just weird and awkward."
It's so funny you say that because I think got up off the couch and was like, yes, when I saw him like in the movie.
My God.
I love him. Have you seen Breaking Bad? Like his character.
He's a great, awkward, weird, creepy piece of shit in that movie too.
Exactly. Yeah, and I've always been intrigued by how he can be so versatile in some of his roles because it is not this. No. It is not this fucking blank stare.
He's weird, awkward, and creepy in every movie and TV show he's in.
No, because he did not put that off.
Game Night. He's weird and awkward and creepy in that.
I blotted him out of my brain for that movie. Ugh.
But no, Remy, back to your point about the OBI thing and that it's like that was what the book was portraying, and Scorsese read the book. He's like, no, I want this to be from the relationship of Ernest and Molly. Like that is what I feel like is even the more like crux of this whole story, is seeing it from the Indians' perspective, and then their relationship perspective, rather than from the Bureau and this like these guys sitting on the hill creating this new investigation kind of team. And this is one of the first like story or something they tackled, so it was definitely a choice.
Yeah, and so Matt and I talked about this like a day or two ago, but
what, you're talking about content without me and not on air?
Sorry, just briefly. But what this movie is missing was the emotional pull of when Molly goes to plead her case to the FBI. That what should have been a super important, powerful moment is wrapped up in like 3 minutes of just showing her on the train in front of the Capitol protesting. Some people briefly talk to her, and then she's back.
People, one of them is President Coolidge. That's the actual president of the United States. That's who she's talking to. She's shaking hands with them.
Talking to?
Yeah, because she's like.
But it's still a really short. Okay,
it is.
I guess I missed that, but it's also still a very short, brief scene, right?
Oh yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, they could have done a lot more time on that one.
So I don't know if that's what really happened. Like exactly, I assume that's what really happened.
Yeah,
she went there for 3 minutes and then left, because otherwise they would have had more in the movie. But it's missing. It's just like that feels like what should have been a moment of her like emotionally breaking down and being like begging and pleading, of being like, this horrible thing is happening to my people, I need you to come down. But it seems so simplified and like watered down. I just feel like it's such a miss in the movie.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. When the only thing I came away from that thinking is they wanted you to be like, oh, it didn't work again. And then when the actual officers show up in, Oklahoma, they're like, oh, they actually did come. They did listen to her plea. So they wanted that to be more the moment than him deciding it on Capitol Hill kind of thing.
Going back to the idea of realistic versus not realistic, there was a Oscar-nominated performance by Gary Oldman where he plays Winston Churchill in a movie a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. And there's I have not seen the movie, but I have seen the scene where he does this speech where he says, we will fight them on the beaches, we'll fight them on the shore, we will never surrender. A very famous speech by Winston Churchill. And I've heard that. I've listened to Winston Churchill's speech a billion times. I've listened to that. We will never surrender. He just sounds drunk and like very slow speech. But in the movie, it's this cinematic score. And he's like, we will never surrender. And it's just very rousing. And it's clear that is not the way the speech was given, but it's done for the sake of cinema. So I don't know if her going to Washington was this very just cut and dry, hey, my people are dying, I need help. And maybe, could they have done an interpretation of that where she's pleading and crying? And I guess that's this Lily Gladstone. Mm-hmm. That is kind of the thing, is that she doesn't do the like, I'm going for the Oscar thing. She doesn't give that impassioned plea. And maybe it's more realistic the way she does it, where she's much more like calm and measured. But it does detract from when you're watching this for 3.5 hours and you don't get this abundance of pain displayed, because these actors are very like well within themselves. It is just it's a tough cinematic balance to ask anyone to do. And is it the correct choice? Is it the realistic choice? I do not know. But it was 3.5 hours, and I felt like it didn't need to be 3.5 hours.
The theatrics weren't there. You're absolutely right. And I think that's what Scorsese was going for. He didn't want to be this theatrical kind of those Leo smashing his hand down on the table and cutting himself and wiping it on someone. Like this very, because I didn't feel like there was a lot of scenes that they were, off the cuff, or in what do they call it when the actors kind of do whatever they want? Improvise. Yeah, I didn't feel like this was an improvised or over the top thing. This was like, hey, we got just a story to tell. Get in, get out, do your thing.
Yeah. So final thoughts, final feelings, ratings, Rembo, how in the Pantheon. And I will give you this opportunity to apologize to the Irishman because you have shat on the Irishman.
All the Irishmen.
I feel like with this movie specifically, the Irishman shined
Irish
even brighter.
I would like to take this time to apologize to absolutely fucking no one. All right, you laid it up for me. And especially because Conor McGregor, Irishman.
That big 4-dimensional brain right there. That's big brain.
Yes, I would rather watch The Irishman than watch this movie. And I can't believe I'm going to say that. But this movie, I just got to the end of it and I was like, I wasn't bored, but I never want to watch that movie again. Like, and I think it's very, it would have been better served as a documentary. That's what I said earlier, and Jason had kind of had made comments on that, and I think that I would rather watch this as a multi-part documentary with inclusion of how the FBI was formed, because I think that could be really interesting and fun. And so completely removing that from the story definitely did not need to be 3.5 hours. It's well shot. It's for the most part well acted, even if I think Lily Gladstone is boring. It's just too long. It's an old director who's way past his prime and should hang it up. I don't need to see any more Martin Scorsese movies. The man is past his prime. He's done. Instead, what you should be watching is Reacher. Fantastic performance by Alan Ritchson. Go watch Reacher. Future or next episode.
Yes, tune in next time.
Catch that next week.
Yes, catch Reacher after you watch Chicago Fire, Chicago MD,
NCIS,
FBI Saskatchewan, Miami,
Rin 10 Canine Cop from the 90s.
New York Med School, whatever other Middle America shows you want to watch.
Final rating for The Killers of the Flower Moon. I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5.
Oof.
Just like
out of 5.
It's not bad. It's definitely not a bad movie. It's just not that intriguing for what I think is an intriguing, interesting story, but it's just the way it's told is not so much.
I'm surprised in your self-control of waiting this long to talk about Reacher. I thought we were going to try to sneak that one in.
I did
here.
so good.
Tune in next week where we talk about Reacher, the latest hit smash from Prime Video. You can sign up for 30 days of Prime with a free trial. Check your local listings.
Wait, is that our
code LPD?
Is that our new sponsor? I'm not getting sponsor money from this, man. Are you hoarding all?
No,
your stuff?
Not yet. No, we're not.
Oh no!
No, if we get a sponsor, we have to go.
If you learn nothing from Killers of the Flower Moon, you are going to see the money that I make from LPD so much later than Remy and I. We will be taking this money very quickly.
I'm okay with third on the hierarchy of this one. Yeah.
Oh man.
3 out of 5 for you. Interesting. Okay. I think this movie did exactly what it was supposed to do, and I think it's expectations, wanting something different. Cause like I said in the very beginning, it felt long, but it used its time, it used its time accurately. I feel like, because there was a lot of information and a huge story that we needed to have. It was the whole Law and Order thing where we get the crime in the beginning and then we get the trial at the end, sort of thing. But, how about those lawyers though?
Brendan Fraser
and what's his name? The other one,
John Lithgow.
Yeah. As soon as I saw them, I'm like, I have some star power on the lawyers.
Was John Lithgow ever not 50 plus years
Nope,
old.
nope. He has stayed the
Give
same
it
age his
Thorne a
entire
grandpa.
Yeah, he looks exactly like he did his third Rock from the Sun. I mean, he's exactly. They just like they froze him at that point in his life and continued acting. And the exact opposite for Brendan Fraser. That is not Encino Man anymore. He's not some rip stoner. For some Cali dude. So,
That's so funny.
but yeah, back to final thoughts on that. I mean, yeah, long time runtime justified in my opinion. Beautiful movie. I felt so immersed the whole time in that culture and that landscape, and the Roaring Twenties, the times, how Native Americans were embracing this money and even dressing differently and using the cars and like things. I enjoyed that part of the movie in the 20s and what that was and the style and stuff, because like Great Gatsby I felt like was that, but they just stylized it way too much and CG'd the cars and hip hop music and all this. So the fact that this was like, I think, real music from those tribes and real music from the 20s, and a lot of that stuff felt so real. So yeah, we're beating a dead horse on documentary, but that's what I kind of like was immersed in this. And so I get this huge information dump where I feel like I'm more well-rounded about that time frame. But I know I hear all your complaints, and it's all about expectations. Yeah, I went in with nothing, so I came out with something very different than you guys. And so I would actually watch it again, and I'd recommend it to people. It's just, it comes with a lot of extra. Like, I'd say that, and then I'd preface with a lot of other things like, well, you got to be ready for this, and you got to be ready for, you not to be happy with your station in life after watching this movie. So I mean, it did what it needed to do, and it's funny that you guys were looking for something different, and that's like the book. So it's like, I would love for you guys like to read the book and like be like, okay, that's what I was looking for out of the story, was that FBI kind of foundation rather than this love story. Actually, I don't even know, go as far as love story, but this relationship of these two. Did I have the subtitles not on? And did they not subtitle a lot of this movie? Was that something else that you guys noticed, as they were like speaking in Osage or whatever, and there would be no subtitles a lot of the times?
I'm pretty sure that was when the subtitles came on, was when Lily Gladstone would talk in Osage. A lot of times they would come on, but there were some times where she would just speak and none would come on.
Yeah,
But
De
most of
Niro
the
and
time, I felt like it
Leo
would come
too.
on.
Like, a lot of the stuff that those guys would say wouldn't have subtitles and things. So it's like little things like that where it's like, I wouldn't understand this language, and a lot of people in the room didn't. So it's like hearing this guy say it and only a couple people would understand. It was just that next level of immersion by not giving us so much insight into actually what the language or what they were saying. It's like the group thing in Galaxy, it's like you only started to understand once, we're part of the tribe or something like that. Because I was impressed with how quickly Leo picked up the language too. So just another very like, realistic part of that movie. So yeah, I walk away with it happy and enjoyed the experience, whatnot. And so I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Yeah, I think that's my final answer.
There is the problem I have with a lot of the modern popular shows, and I feel like that is the same problem I have with this movie. If we're just not story, because the story is riveting, but as far as a movie, as far as a TV show, a lot of the popular shows are based on a family that's a piece of shit. And so if I watch Succession, everyone in Succession's a piece of shit. If you watch Yellowstone, that's a family that's a bunch of rich jerks. That's a piece of shit. And that's kind of a lot of Empire. It's a family and they're a piece of shit. Every single one of these popular shows is, oh, look how terrible this family is. That's kind of this movie, is like Robert De Niro and
Leo DiCaprio.
Jack, who drowned.
Leo.
Jack, who drowned.
Jack, who drowned. Like that.
A lot of it is just like, yeah, like as characters that I care about watching, they just are just shitty people, and they're not interestingly enough. The way that the Joe Pesci is a piece of shit in Goodfellas, but you're like, I cannot stop watching this guy. This guy is so riveting. That's what this movie lacks as far as a movie goes, and it's a terrible, sad state of affairs of America at that time. And it is an important watch, perhaps, if someone was unaware of the atrocities that beget the Native American people in America. Then perhaps this would be a good informative, like, hey, watch something that didn't happen in the 17 or 1800s. This is something that happened only 100 years ago, and this is a horrible tale in American history. Yeah, it's an informative tale as far as that. Probably better to either read the book, listen to the audiobook, but as a movie, 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10. It's a very well-made movie, and it does have Martin Scorsese isms. It has music that plays, and it has interesting editing, especially when they discover the oil, and it's the slow motion of everyone's excited. There is quality there, but man, it was just compared to The Irishman, where it's much more of a riveting tale and interesting characters. It did not quite satisfy my needs. But that being said, hopefully this will be a previous tale in American history and not a future one. And that is Last Page.